Oh, it was a night meeting. You were you doing reels and stuff?
All night jazz for Mr. Wood. I was a high school kid going to Elder High School. Mr. Wood, Frank Sr., hired me on the spot. I walked over there. The roof wasn't even on
the building at Considine?
The transmitter shack.
Yeah.
And I said, Mr. Wood? He says, that's me. He didn't even look up at me. You know? And then he said, do you know how to solder? I said, yes, sir. He looked up at me with those big, bushy eyebrows, handed me a soldering iron, whatever, and we were doing coaxial transmission wires. Hired me on the spot. Didn't see anybody there, not even you, until the night shifts.
Right.
Reading poetry and playing Joan Baez and Judy Collins and Velvet Underground, Moby Grape.
Country Joe was one of my favorite people.
Come on, all you big, strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. We could sing all day, but I'm sure our audience doesn't want to hear that.
Well, you haven't heard me sing.
Well,
no, but you're right. I think about it. Nobody listening, watching.
You actually met my parents because they came over when I was, doing my nighttime thing, and they wanted to see what their son was doing. You came in and I introduced you. This is my mother and father. The rest is history.
Yeah.
You left. All I had was Tyler. Well, I had Bo, Denton.
Yeah.
The rest of the group, and it grew, and lots of people.
Well, and then Bo left for Chicago.
Yes.
Fairly promptly. I was.
Yes.
70, I think.
I have the notes somewhere in my archives.
Chicago was a lot of fun, though. We really enjoyed that. It was a different kind of setup, and we were in the pardon me, the ABC backstage area, and like Paul Harvey had his office down the hall from the FM station that Bo and I were involved with, and actually he was quite friendly with the long-haired hippie crowd that was hanging around in the hallway and occasionally coming into his office. I developed a strong attraction and affection for Paul Harvey when I was there. It was quite interesting because he would get on the air and sound like Mr. Conservative, but he actually had a history which was a little wilder than that. And I was in Chicago last November, and I was thinking about working there. I had taken a walk past the building where the ABC backstage area was located, and where our radio studio was located also. You could look out the window and see the river and the Wrigley building across the street. It was very pleasant. Felt very in town, really enjoyed looking out the window while I was doing my show. And
the Windy City.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so you literally got blown away,
I was.
or you were blown away the people,
Yeah.
or was
Well-
it the winds of Chicago? I'm sorry.
We were doing our best to present something that was going to draw an audience, but eventually it didn't, because they switched from rock and roll to talk, and I don't know whether that was successful or not, because I was out at that point and headed back to Cincinnati. Anyway, while I'm in Chicago walking down the street, I found myself thinking about having been there and having gone on to Cincinnati and gone to work for WCPO. And Bob Gordon, who was the program director there, as I was walking down the street, I started thinking about him. And I couldn't remember his name at first. I thought, program director didn't like me and wanted to fire. Oh, Bob Gordon, right, it was Bob Gordon. And Bob Gordon, again, did not care for a certain independence in my attitude that had annoyed other people for whom I'd worked in the past, and looked for ways in which he could get rid of me. But there was really no reason to get rid of me. I was functioning well and doing well in the couple of jobs I did. There was a Sunday morning show called Traffic. It involved young people, playing a game on the air, and a police officer named Bob Morgan and myself, Mr. Patches, were the hosts and sort of ran the game.
So you went on to be Mr.
Play It Safe was the game.
You went on to be Mr. Patches.
That came up with the Uncle Al show.
Well, right.
There was a lot of focus being put on children's television, and shows like Uncle Al's, which were really mired, is the word that comes into mind, in the past, were being scrutinized, and people responsible for looking at children's TV were looking at shows like his and saying, well, you can't really have the host of a kid show plugging products on the air. That isn't really what we want to be doing for our children. So they were looking for somebody who could come on and not be the host of the kid show. And
Mama's Cookies.
Mama's Cookies and Barks.
Yeah, Barks Root Beer. Yeah.
And which subsequently, of course, then once they did have me in there to do commercials, in quotes, we were still giving presents to children who were there. If that's for me, I'm not here.
No, we have people calling in on the line, probably wanting to speak with you. That's my sister.
Where were they? So we would have games with the children where they'd win a prize, and of course it would be Mama's Cookies or Barks. And we still were hawking the product in the course of doing the show.
Well, that good sugar.
So I was brought on as Mr. Patches, and the character developed itself. It started out very straight, and developed into where I was described by one publication in Cincinnati as a grown-up flower child.
But you cut your hair.
Yes, I did. I did cut my hair and shaved my beard while I was in Chicago because I had an agent there who was sending me around on commercials, and they weren't hiring people with beards and long hair at that point. So yeah, that had been cut. And
Got to make a living.
Mr. Patches turned out to be a wonderful character. It was an aspect of myself, of course, but had a life of
My
his own.
daughter used to. She was on Uncle Wal's show, you know. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah. And then the competition was Skipper Rao, Glenn Rao.
yeah.
But anyway, go ahead.
Skipper was a different kind of.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I would go around town and see children and their parents on the street and interact with them. And it was quite wonderful. I was very, very happy being Mr. Patches, and that feeds into what I was talking about earlier, which is walking down the street in Chicago and thinking about having worked in Chicago and subsequently worked in Cincinnati on WCPO, and Bob Gordon wanting to fire me, and Bob Gordon succeeding finally in having an excuse to fire me. As I'm walking down the street, I'm thinking, so Bob Gordon was happy. He had succeeded. He'd done what he wanted to do, and it must have made him quite happy to have fired me. Subsequently, I am looking for a job in Ohio, and I'm not finding one. And I'm finally forced to go to New York and look at a bigger field than I had been involved with in Cincinnati. And I was quite successful in New York as an actor and doing commercials, doing soap operas. And so finally I reached the point where in order to keep my career going, I needed to move on. I went to Los Angeles.
And that was a big turn.
Oh, that was wonderful. And I was quite successful in Los Angeles.
Yes, you were.
And there I met my wife Joanne, and we had our daughter Zan. And my life was so full and rich and happy that I realized, walking down the street in Chicago, that I had won. And in that instance, Michael, I suddenly understood that Bob Gordon had won, and I had won. And it was immediately clear to me that this is not a freak happening, that the reality of life is it's a win-win proposition. No matter how it may look, right? No matter how it may appear.
I like that analogy.
Or no matter what happens to you or to other people, ultimately, life is a win-win proposition. And I was overcome with that knowledge. I hurried back. I was staying at the hostel in Chicago on this visit, and hurried back so that I could write down the conclusions I had come to, because I realized that I never would have stopped being Mr. Patches. I loved that role, that personality extension that I was putting out, and I never would have stopped. Now eventually we all are let go at some point.
Oh yeah.